Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Omnipod 5, the only tubeless pump that integrates with Dexcom G6, by Dexcom G7, effortless diabetes management that fits into your lifestyle, and by Edgepark. Simplify your diabetes journey with Edgepark.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, it's been 5 years since Ryan Reed has been behind the wheel at a NASCAR track. Earlier this month, he raced in Vegas as part of the Xfinity Cup Series. We talked about what's changed for his type 1 management, how he handles diabetes and driving, and why it's mostly not about race day.
Because once you're in the car, your game plan is set and you have very little room to maneuver left and right. So what you do leading up to the event is so important. And I used to say that too, but before when I was racing Xfinity every single weekend, I would talk about it is so important to be prepared because once you're in the car, you have so little options.
Ryan does talk about those options. He has changed to a pump since we last talked, and he shares why he made that decision, what else he's up to these days, and why he says he appreciates the diabetes community now more than ever. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. All right, welcome to another week of the show. You know I'm always so glad to have you here, and we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. Y'all, I am busier than Times Square on New Year's Eve. It's for great reasons, and I am loving it. But oh my gosh, this is the first time in a long time that I can remember thinking, how am I going to get everything done? So before we get to Ryan Reed, I want to catch you up very briefly on what's happening. I'm going to give you the headlines here, and I will come back after the interview with more detail. First, this is episode 600 of this little show. We launched in June of 2015. I have produced an episode almost every week since, sometimes twice a week. You really are an amazing audience and an incredible community. I can't say thank you enough. And if you want to do something to celebrate or, say congratulations or whatever, thank you very much for that. The best thing you can do is just share the show with someone who you think needs to hear it. The second headline is that we are this close to announcing the next 3 locations for Mom's Night Out. We're going to have 4 stops in 2024. I am looking forward to seeing everybody in Providence, Rhode Island this weekend, October 27th and 28th. If this is the first you're hearing about it and you want to come, this is a new event for moms of kids with diabetes. I do have a couple of places I could squeeze you in. Shoot me an email, stacy@diabetes-connections.com, and we'll figure out how to make it work. And the third headline here is the biggest one. After a lot of thought and conversations and some soul searching, I've decided to launch a second podcast specifically about type 2 diabetes. Diabetes Connections Type 2 launches November 1st. I told you I was busy. Okay, much more on all of that after my interview with Ryan Reed. Okay, so many of you will remember that Ryan was diagnosed with type 1 at 17 years old. He had already decided to move from California to North Carolina, here in Charlotte, where a lot of NASCAR teams are based. But he was told initially he would have to give up racing. Luckily, that was not the case. They found a way to make it work. And then Ryan became the first documented person with type 1 to win a NASCAR Top Series race at Daytona. He had another win there in 2017. I've talked to Ryan twice for this podcast back in the days when he was racing regularly. I've also talked to his mom, and I met her at a local event a couple of years ago. I'm going to link up all of those past episodes in the show notes for this one because we don't spend a lot of time talking about his diabetes story. If you haven't heard it, I recommend that you go back and listen to my first episode with him. Ryan was back on the track earlier this month in the number 66 Tandem Blue Chevrolet Camaro at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Obviously, Tandem Diabetes is one of his sponsors, and he wears their pump system. We talk about that and a lot more right after this. You know that I'm a big fan of choice when it comes to diabetes technology. I get excited when there's something new because if you live with diabetes, you deserve to find the best fit for you. And that's just one reason I'm working with Omnipod to help spread the word about what makes it so easy to test their system out. If you want to try an insulin pump or see what life without tubes is all about, you can try Omnipod 5 with no commitment or obligation. You can try Omnipod even if your current tubed pump is in warranty. Really? You heard that right. And if it's not for you, it is no problem. Omnipod doesn't tie you down with a contract or a tube. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, go to omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Ryan, great to talk to you again. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. It's good to be back. It's even better to have some racing news related to talk about.
Yeah, let's start right there. How was it? We're talking just a couple of days after you got back on the track. What was that like?
It was so fun. There was a lot of, kind of layers to it. What made it special for me? Really, the whole experience, I think, though, when I was racing full time, you go through all these same emotions. You go through all these same experiences and the range of emotions. But when you take a 5-year hiatus from it, you can appreciate the little things a little more. So I think it started with the announcement last week before, and to see the kind of outpour of support from fans, from the type 1 diabetes community, from different people in the industry, in the racing industry, that were excited to have me back and be a part of the series and be a part of the sport again. And a lot of support from fellow drivers and people in the industry that wanted to help me kind of get up to speed, because you get 20 minutes of practice and you get one lap for qualifying. So it comes at you fast and furious once you get to the track. So being able to, work with some of the guys that I've known for a long time to help me prepare. And so I think, like I said, just every part of it, I was able to really remind myself how cool it is and what a cool experience it is. So I really got to enjoy it, where I think doing it every weekend, these reps become part of your daily routine. So it's easy to take it for granted. So I think for me, while I had done most of this already, it was so cool to just be able to go through those experiences again.
Yeah. So for those of us who are not super familiar with NASCAR or Xfinity, what happens next for you? Is this a one and done? As you said, you're not going to be out there every weekend. What's the plan?
That's a great question, and certainly one that I'm asking myself a lot right now too, because I had so much fun. And my hope is that we can build on this. We can build on this momentum and get out there. I don't think that you never say never, right? You don't know what kind of what the next chapter holds. But I think for me, if I could go out next year and run 4, 5, 6, 7 races, that would be really cool. That would be a win, right? That'd be able to take this momentum and say, okay, that's awesome. And I get to go out there and compete, X amount of times with a great race team would be so cool. And be able to continue to tell the story, use the NASCAR platform, talk about living with type 1 diabetes and spread that message and use it for the advocacy piece that we all care so much about. I think those would be some of the things that would be really, really cool for me. But I think it's all about, being able to have the opportunity with, finding the right race team that wants to see you, pilot their race car, and then finding partners who want to be a part of it. And so obviously last weekend was able to happen because of those two things. I was able to find a great race team. And then I was also able to have obviously Tandem Diabetes Care come on board as a partner and help get us to the racetrack.
Yeah, it's a very different sport than people I think may be familiar with if they're only watching baseball or basketball.
Yeah, exactly. It is unique, and I think that comparing it to stick and ball sports is impossible because of the different complexities. I would consider it like if you're comparing it to a more traditional sport, I would say it's more like the PGA Tour or golfing, where you can get these one-off opportunities to go play, in a major tournament or to play on the tour. It doesn't mean that you're full time. It means you had an opportunity through one avenue or another. And while you're not going to be able to create 100% parallel here, I think that that's the best way to look at it. Is you'll see these guys pop up and be able to come do it for whatever reason. They got a past champions waiver, whatever the scenario is. And racing is much the same. And so I think that and just like on the PGA Tour, if you have some momentum, that's your time, that you can capitalize on that and build on it and hopefully put a run together that gets you there. Doesn't have to be full time, but on a more regular basis.
Well, let's talk about diabetes, because, diabetes itself doesn't change, but the way you manage can. Can you share with me a little bit about how you've changed, if you have, in the last 5 years?
Oh, so much. Yeah. So much. We all know lifestyle plays a huge role in your diabetes and your overall approach to how you manage it. My lifestyle has changed a lot from when I was racing full time every single weekend and being 24, 25, mid 20s. Now I'm 30. And so, just in that alone, there's been a lot of change. I'm a pumper now. I was never a pumper when I was racing full time, in my mid 20s. So that's been a big change. It's been a lot different. I think that my approach to life is just different in general. I talked about lifestyle, and not racing every weekend, but just kind of how I approach my training, how I approach life in general. At 30, I prioritize sleep a little more. The days of feeling like I'm super rested with 5 or 6 hours of sleep is not the case. So as I've gotten older, I think that I've been able to just be a little more aware of the little things that I do, whether that putting insulin in my body, sleep, diet, exercise. Exercise for me when I was in my mid-20s was just all out. How tired could I be at the end of every workout? Now it's like, okay, well, how can my body feel the best? And so those are all the little things, but it's changed a lot. And, I had a pretty long honeymoon phase where my body was still making some insulin, very little now. So, I'd say that diabetes in a way has been a little more challenging in these last 5 to 6 years since we last talked, but it's a lot different, but at the end of the day, it's still all the same. You know what I mean? It's different the day in and day out, and maybe my ratios are a little different, but at the end of the day, it's still diabetes.
Yeah. You were reminding me when you said you switched to pumping that, on your uniform, you had like this little patch where you could inject through and things like that. Do you mind sharing why you made the switch to an insulin pump?
Yeah, it was something that, and I never actually talked about this beforehand when I was racing in my mid-20s. When I had originally got diagnosed, and you got to keep in mind, technology was a lot different. I was diagnosed in 2011. Things were just different. I remember I was on I was put on a Dexcom within like the first 3 months of being diagnosed.
Probably a G4 back then.
I think it was a G. I think it was a G4. Yeah. And realistically, it puts you in the ballpark of what your blood sugar was doing. Is it going up? Is it down? Is it in the kind of the low hundreds, mid hundreds? I mean, it was just a ballpark, which was great, right? At the end of that, at that time, it was life changing just to even have something to give you a glimpse into it without having to prick your finger and put blood on a test strip. And so I think the whole philosophy around what wearing a pump meant was just different. Because of that, it was really, for me, it was more attractive. And with working with my doctor, it's more attractive to, use a pen and just be on injections. And then with that, there came the conversation around what do you do inside the race car? And then the kind of target on my fire suit that was on the leg for a pit crew member to give me insulin during a pit stop that was kind of invented, right, as a solution to that problem. And it was really cool because it was a chance to tell a story. And I think it gave people an idea of like how real it is. And like, I think that people, when you're talking about living with diabetes, people can, just, it's so hard to understand. It's such a complicated disease. I think for a lot of people, it's just like, oh, they live with type 1 diabetes and whatever goes into that. They don't really empathize. But then for whatever reason, when they would think about me driving a race car and they saw that target, it's like, oh, wait, like if he has to have insulin, this is his only way and he has to get stabbed in the leg. It's like, yeah. And it sounds dramatic, but it's that dramatic every day. It's just, not in the middle of a NASCAR race. So it was always really interesting to have that conversation and see people's reaction when in reality, people are doing this every day. It's just not through a panel of a fire suit during a NASCAR race.
I think if I'd had that fire suit when Benny was about 3 years old, that could have made my life a little easier. Maybe.
Well, and that was the other thing is I never had to do it. In all the years I was racing, I never had to get an injection through the fire suit in the middle of a race, which was thanks to a lot of prep and hard work by myself and the doctors leading up to events to be prepared. But I did my mom gave my first ever insulin shot when I went home from the doctor's office. And to your point, it did not go well. I hated every second of it. She was nervous. I was even more nervous. There was lots of yelling at each other involved. And then after that, the one time, and I was like, I'll never do this again. I'll just handle this myself.
Sympathy to your mom, because we had to do it when Benny was teeny tiny, of course.
Yeah.
But several years later, when he needed a shot, I can't remember, maybe we had an infusion set issue. He was really high and, we would give him an insulin shot to help out. I remember I was so out of practice. I was all shaky and he was like, no, give me that. I got it. I'm fine. Do not come near me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it was like, because I was diagnosed at 17. So, it was good and bad thing because it forced me to kind of rip the metaphorical Band-Aid off because I was like, I was so scared of needles. And I think that's a reasonable thing. Most people aren't thrilled with the idea of being poked or prodded. But then if my choice was like, figure out how to do this myself or just let my mom, it was like, it made the decision really easy. Yeah, exactly. It made the decision really easy. I got 17 years old. You're dying for independence. I'll just handle this.
Yeah. Wow. And I should mention, Ryan, if this is the first time you're listening to an interview with me and Ryan, he then moved across the country. So it was a diabetes diagnosis, really in the midst of a big life change. So I'll refer people back to listen to those previous episodes to kind of catch up on the full story there. But we were talking about switching to an insulin pump. Can you kind of continue where you were with that? Because I'm curious then, to go from shots for all those years to a pump is a big decision. One of the hopes when Benny was diagnosed with diabetes was for a way to deliver mealtime insulin without injections. And there's a way to do that now. Afrezza is the only FDA-approved ultra-rapid-acting insulin. Once you breathe Afrezza into your lungs using the inhaler, insulin appears in your bloodstream in less than 1 minute, and it may start lowering blood sugar in about 12 minutes. You can be spontaneous, but still in control, without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more and see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium. It is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety.
I think for me, it was, as much as anything, curiosity that first kind of got me thinking about it. And I had met the Tandem folks. I've been on Dexcom forever, and I had no intentions of switching from a Dexcom. I wanted to maintain that. And I felt like it was good for me to maintain that, create some continuity in how I manage my diabetes. The Tandem integrated with the Dexcom. I had met the Tandem folks multiple times at different diabetes events around the country. And I really liked their team. They seemed very passionate about the community, and they seemed like they really cared not just about making a great product, okay, but how does that great product translate to making the lives of people with type 1 easier? And it seemed like they really bought into that philosophy. I looked at it many times. It's really cool. It was really sleek. So, I was probably, this is 3 or 4 years ago, so I was 26, call it, when I decided to switch. And so that mattered to me a lot too. Like, was how does it look? Is it clunky? Is it sleek? Is it touchscreen? So it was just kind of like, it kind of checked a lot of the boxes, is where I'm going with that. And I wasn't a pumper, so I didn't have like a checklist of like things that I did or didn't like about a pump specifically. I was just going off of things that I cared about in my day-to-day life. So I called the Tandem folks, and they were like, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to get you set up. They made it super easy with set up training and all that. And that was pretty much it. I switched to it, and it was, for the most part, right away, I loved it. I loved, I think, probably 90% of it. The 10%, I think, was just figuring out how to wear a pump. You know what I mean? Because it's so different than what I had been doing before with my, having insulin pens. That was a massive change for me, was just, figuring out how to wear this pump and sleep and, the different things, and not forgetting about it when you hop in the shower or dive in the swimming pool, things like that are, I think, go into being like mentally aware of wearing this device now. But once I got past that, then I think it was all upside.
When you started with Tandem, did you start with Control IQ? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was already integrated in their system. So, and, obviously, like I said, I was a Dexcom user beforehand, so there wasn't any getting up to speed on that. It was just integrating the pump. The Control IQ, I think, was one of the more attractive things to me, because at that point, it was all very manual. And I felt like the Control IQ offered me a little bit of freedom, where if I missed something, if I miscalculated some carbs, messed up my ratio a little, I had some help. That was very intriguing to me. And sure enough, it's been awesome.
It must be really interesting to start an insulin pump that is an automated system. And more people are starting that now. They've been around for several years now. I know Control IQ was approved in January of 2020, or it was available in January of 2020. That's when we started using it. So I'm trying to figure out, Ryan, like what to ask you, because it's such a different experience than starting with a pump where you have to do everything. You still have to do a lot of work, though, but you can't really compare to what you didn't have before. So I guess I'll just ask, did it do what you thought it would do?
Yeah, well, it's something that I still fight to this day when you go, because while I wasn't on a, more manual pump, I was manual direct injection therapy. I think the biggest thing is that when you let Control IQ do its thing, you've got to give it time. And so if you try to interrupt that Control IQ and get in the middle of it, so to speak, you'll actually throw off some algorithms. So it's really can be a hands-off approach, which I'm not good at. Like, when it comes to my diabetes management, I want to I try to control, and I'll almost kind of like micro bolus, along the way at certain times because I want to have ultra tight control. And so I think that was a big learning curve for me, was how do I not trust, like I don't trust the technology, but it's just so easy to set, okay, I ate some dinner, I bolused for it, but my blood sugar is going a little high for whatever reason. Either I didn't, carb count enough or whatever, didn't work out that day, whatever the case may be. And so my blood sugar is going a little higher than normal, and I want to jump in and bolus, you know what I mean? And I might bolus 2 or 3 times again after dinner, just with little spots along the way. And Control-IQ doesn't like that. It wants you to bolus, and then if you have a little post-meal high, it'll correct for you, and it'll adjust your basal rate, and it'll do these things to help out, which is so cool. But it's hard to relinquish that and just trust it. And so after doing it for so long. So I think that was the thing. That was one of the transitions. And like I said, still is to this day a little bit challenging for me, just because I want to jump in and I want to be in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think the consensus of the community is that it's almost easier to use for most people to just start an AID system if that's the first system ever, MDI, the whole thing, because there are folks, like you that are so used to micromanaging, and I say that in a good way, right? Yeah. They're type 1. There's also people like my son who are like, I'm leaving it all to Control-IQ, which doesn't work that great either. So, you have to find that happy medium. But man, it's such a great system. I'm thrilled with it. So how do you use a pump in a race car? I know you did it, for the first time over the weekend. Was there anything you needed to do differently? I mean, the temperature is what I was thinking about.
I think the biggest thing is just the training beforehand. The pump, where I felt like this time being able to compare and contrast to before, was just everything leading up to the event. My exercise is probably where I see the biggest difference, where we go back to that Control-IQ technology. And, when I'm training, I tend different than in the race car. But while I'm training, I tend to have lows, which a lot of us do, right? Especially because I kind of tend to do more of like a HIIT style training. I will try to start my workouts a little, like 160, 170, use the exercise feature. And then even with that, I still will trail off 120-ish, maybe 100 by the end of the workout. And, I think that's where, when it starts to sense that, it goes to suspend. If nothing else, it buys me some time before I, I can get my workout in and then do my post-workout, shake or what have you. Or, if I need to take in some candy or whatever to treat a low, that's fine. But it at least lets me get through the workout, where I felt like before I had to stop working out a lot. And when I say a lot, even if it's once a week or twice a month, that's still more than you want to do, right? Like you want to train consistently and you want to be present while you're training. So I felt like switching the pump, I was able to be a little more present, and not worry so much about lows, which I felt like helped my training. And I felt like I was able to train more consistently without breaks in the action. And then sleep. The other one, it was the other big one for me, is sleep. Like we talk about, I've compared NASCAR to golf earlier. And one of the biggest things that I feel like, one of the biggest parallels I see there is the mental side and how important sleep is. And I've in my later 20s, I've really invested a lot more time in understanding the importance of sleep for an athlete or for business, whatever your profession is. Sleep's going to help you. And it also helps my diabetes significantly. When I'm tired and my cortisol levels are up because I'm stressed out, because I don't feel good, my blood sugar tends to go higher. So I just run higher throughout the day. And I feel like the sleep function helps my sleep quality a lot too. It has for sure saved me from having lows in the middle of the night where I would have had to get up. And when I have to get up to treat a low, I feel like I never get back to sleep very well. Like if I get up at 2, I feel like I'm just, and treat a low, you're taking in carbs in the middle of the night. And I feel like it messes up my whole rhythm. So I think those were probably, if I think back to like, okay, where's pump when in regards to racing different than before? It was the training and the sleep leading up to the event, even more so than once I was in the car, because once you're in the car, your game plan is set and, you have very little room to maneuver left and right. So what you do leading up to the event is so important. And I used to say that too, but before, when I was racing Xfinity every single weekend, I would talk about like, it is so important to be prepared, because once you're in the car, you have so little options. The preparation and everything you do with your doctor leading up to the event is critical.
What a great answer, Ryan. I really appreciate that, because as a person who doesn't have diabetes and doesn't wear an insulin pump, what a simple thing for me to say, like, oh, well, where do you wear it in the car? And your answer shows how much more complex the whole situation is. But I do want to follow up and say, it gets really hot in that race car. Did your pump do okay?
Yeah, the heat is always the big concern. I mean, the heat is a concern for everybody in under any circumstances, right? Because when it gets hot in there, you're battling dehydration. So you talk about with in regards to diabetes, yeah, you definitely have to make sure that you're able to manage those. That you're able to keep everything cool, not just from a diabetes angle, but just so yeah. I mean, it's definitely something you got to pay attention to and be aware of, regardless. But thankfully, they've come a long way with driver cooling and things like that to help out.
Cool. Do you still keep and correct me if I'm wrong here, do you still keep like glucose liquid in the car with you?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny because I used to I had like a kind of like a almost like a custom powder that I would make. Like I'd use like a Gatorade base and like add dextrose and like different things and now I just use Gatorade. Less complicated now, but it's funny because it's so it's so 1-to-1. Like when I get in my street car versus a race car, like if I get in and I don't have it, I'm forgetting something. It's like if you forget your wallet at home, you're like, gosh, as soon as you get in the car, like I'm forgetting something. It's the same thing. I'm so programmed to not get in any sort of vehicle without having a Gatorade nearby. And half the time it's just a hot Gatorade I have sitting in my center console. But at least I know it's there. And it's the same thing with, getting in the car. Just I'm so used to having two bottles inside the car, one being water, one being some sort of sports drink, typically to treat a low. So the answer is yes, I still do. It's just less complicated now.
Perfect. I seem to recall back in the day that you had to really, I don't know if fight's the right word, but you had to negotiate with NASCAR to get the Dexcom system to share or to at least have it on display in your car. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, well, so obviously we know that Dexcom is the way that the whole system is set up. It's a cloud-based system in order to share. So you need a device to transmit whatever the data is you're getting from the Dexcom into internet-based cloud system. Well, we all do that with our phone, and we know that like when we get on airplane, if we get on an airplane, we don't have Wi-Fi. We're no longer sharing our data. We can see it locally, we can see it on our devices, but we can't see it from a cloud-based perspective. So unless you're connected to the device through Bluetooth, you're not going to have access to it. And so that's one of the things in the race car is you can't have your cell phone in the car, so you can't transmit that data. So you still see it locally, so you still have visibility. It's just you don't have the outward visibility that you do that when I'm driving my street car and my mom can look at my blood sugar and then call me and yell at me if it's too low.
But you didn't change that. You didn't, broadcast or whatever to anybody while you're racing. Okay, so I was
yeah, and it's been that way for a long time. It's something that I think it'd be really nice, and if I was to say, that would be something I would love to talk to NASCAR about. Is say, hey, listen, how can we come up with maybe it's a phone that they control? Because the big thing is what they don't want is they don't want to take that device and then teams, and it's NASCAR teams, right? Like they're built to optimize on everything and to color outside the lines. So they don't want teams using it for any sort of technical advantage. And so to transmit any data that others wouldn't have. So I think that I would like to, because it would be a weight lifted off my shoulders to where I could be more present. And then, the team could tell me every single lap if I wanted to, or every 5 laps, and communicate that, I think that'd be nice.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, I know at least one young man who races and has, big dreams. He's in middle school now, and I'm sure his mom is following, if she's allowed to, whatever system he's in. So that's why I was curious about that.
No, it's a great question. Yeah.
I first met you, I want to say it was 2011 or 2012. It was a long time ago, Ryan, because Benny was teeny tiny. You were here in Charlotte. You were already meeting with kids. It couldn't have been that long after your own diagnosis. Right. You have been a big part of this community for a long time. And I saw you this summer at Friends for Life, surrounded by kids and parents. Do you still enjoy doing all that?
Yeah, honestly, I think I might enjoy it more now. I talked about in the beginning of the show being able to appreciate things a little more after taking some time away from them. And, we all were affected by it deeply during COVID, right? So we all kind of had a hiatus from our day-to-day lives in some way, shape, or form in 2020. And I think between that and then just with my life going a different direction with what I do for a full-time job, there hasn't been as much of that. I think that whether you're talking about from the advocacy side or being able to go to the racetrack and interact with, fans and folks with type 1 coming out to see me, I have a much bigger appreciation for what that opportunity means and how fortunate I am to get to tell my story and have it be on a platform like this. So I've always loved it, and I've always been very passionate about it. I think that I just have it a little more. I think I just have a little more maturation, having, the last few years under my belt, and getting to fully appreciate, or at least a little more appreciate what that means to me. It's really cool. Tandem does a great job, and I know that they're on the race car this weekend, but this is a true statement. One of the things that I was really attracted to them when we talked about from a partnership level and using their product, they do really, really cool events to engage the community. They really care. They want to make it unique. It starts with their product. Their product looks different. It is different. It's cutting edge. But then just the way that the events that they set up, like you talked about us seeing each other down in Florida a few weeks ago, those are the kinds of events where I'm like, man, this is so cool. And it's so easy to want to be a part of it because they're fun, they're different. And there's a lot of accessibility and a lot of connection that I think it creates with the diabetes community.
I should have asked you at the beginning when you mentioned it. What are you doing? What is your day job these days?
What is my day job? It is a lot different than when I was driving race cars every weekend. So my family has been in ag for a long time. I grew up in California, and I work for a California-based company that manufactures food ingredients, mainly from fruit and vegetables. It's a cool company. It's a really sustainable company. The name of the company is VIVI. So I manage the East Coast business for them, which kept me local here in Charlotte. It was an opportunity to stay in Charlotte, even though the company is based in California. But it's cool because they sell a lot of really healthy ingredients. Obviously, I have a big personal passion of mine is health and wellness. And it's very much a health and wellness based company. My other passion is obviously driving cars at a high rate of speed. So it doesn't really check that box, but it does surround me day in and day out with kind of a health and wellness mindset based company. So it's really cool. And a big shout out to them because last week, as I was getting ready to go to Vegas to compete in the Xfinity race, they were really cool about me taking some time and being a little unplugged from my day job. So I got to play hooky from fruit salesman Ryan Reed to go back to being driver Ryan Reed. So hopefully they were really cool. A lot of them tuned in, got a lot of messages from the group over the weekend. They were very supportive. So hopefully if I do some more next year, they'll still be supportive of it.
That's awesome. Hey, before I let you go, it occurred to me when you were talking about keeping your warm Gatorade in the car. I'm going to be honest, Ryan, I don't want my son driving like you around the streets of Charlotte. I mean, I'm sure you drive very safely when you are on the highway and not on the track. But seriously, do you have any advice I'm asking really more for parents of kids who are, the parents are listening to the show. So if you've got a kid who's driving age, I mean, Benny and I went through lots of agreements and lots of rules when he was learning to drive that I didn't have to worry about with my daughter. Any advice for kids with diabetes who are getting their driver's license?
Yeah, I would say just be patient, which is not something that I was great at. But when I say be patient, it's not don't go and do the things you want to do, because that's the beautiful part of getting your license, right? Is that freedom. I about half my lifetime ago now, which is a little sad. But when I got I remember like it was yesterday how excited I was to get my driver's license, go take off. I mean, something as simple as just going to the drive-through to pick up lunch for myself. That was cool because you don't get to do that, until that point in your life. But it is so much easier, and life gets so much more simple if you just check your blood sugar before you get in the car, understand where you're at, and then just make sure that you have the tools necessary in your car to manage your diabetes. Whether, for me right now, I always have an extra pump site. I talk about a warm Gatorade. I always have warm Gatorade or something in center console to treat a low. For me, those are the two things that I know that I need to not leave the house without, because if I'm going to have a problem, it's a little inconvenient to check your blood sugar and make sure you're prepared. It's a lot inconvenient if you have an issue. And so that's always my advice, is just be prepared. You're going to have to be more prepared than your friends are. That's just the reality of it. You have more to think about, but that's okay. Once you get where you're going, if you have everything you need, it makes your life a lot more enjoyable.
And then one last thing, I should have asked you this earlier. Have you seen Tandem's Mobi? Is that something that you would think about at all? I don't want to make you speculate.
No.
I'm curious.
No. It's cool. Yeah, I have seen it. It's super cool. I saw it in person. It was different than because I saw some stuff on the internet about it. I was like, man, that's interesting, but I didn't really know how if it would be something I'd be interested in or not. And then when I saw it in person, I was like, I'm definitely interested in this. It's so small. That's the thing that is crazy about it. I won't say too much because
I'm going to talk to Tandem about it, so I don't want to get you in trouble.
No. That's great, but I know what I can say, which is I'm 1000% interested in it, and it's so small. I've gotten to the point where with my pump as it is, I barely notice it. like I can forget that I have it on me, right? Just because like with your cell phone in your pocket, you're not like, oh my God, I have to lug this around, right? Like it's just your cell phone. Like you're used to it. And pumps the same way, right? Like I'm so used to it. It's just part of my life. It's part of, what everything that I do and get ready, like wearing a t-shirt, like it's just part of life. But then when I was messing with the Mobi, I'm like, oh my gosh, like sleeping with this or going out and working out with this, or just like getting in my car, whatever, going to dinner. It's so cool. I'm really excited for everyone to check it out. I think everyone's going to be like super blown away with it. And there's going to be a lot of questions around it because it's different. And that's one of the other cool parts that I like about it is it's different. And they really thought outside the box. So I think I teased it well without getting myself in trouble. So I'll stop there.
I just saw it. I was at my own event. I was at a Mom's Night Out event in Texas, and I saw it held it for the first time. It's really interesting. And I'm actually talking to Tandem for a future episode, and I have a lot of questions. So
yeah. Well, that was so when I held it, when they showed me, I'm like, there's going to be so many questions about this. Like there's going to be that was my first thought is like, this is so cool. And like, I'm all the way into it, but there's so many questions.
Anything on the schedule that we want to talk about, where appearances or anything like that? I know your schedule's kind of changing.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I have a trip to Australia here in about 10 days, but it's not for diabetes. It's just one of my best friends is getting married and I'm in the wedding. So right now I'm just thinking about that, making sure that I'm prepared to leave the country for about 2 weeks. I'm sure there will be. And so I will follow along on Instagram, Twitter. I'll keep you all posted. And yeah, so I can't thank you enough for having me on. This was a lot of fun, and it's good to catch up. And I know you have a great group of listeners, so it's good to be back on here and kind of catch everyone up on what I've been up to.
Oh, we really appreciate you spending some time with us, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacey.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Like I always do, I will link up more about Ryan in the show notes. I should also let you know that I have a photo of Benny and Ryan from 2013 at a JDRF event here in Charlotte. It's a terrible photo. I guess it was with an old iPhone. It's 2013, so it can't be with my BlackBerry, although I was a BlackBerry holdout for a very long time. It's just not a great picture, but it's good enough that you can see how young those two kids are. I think Ryan might just be barely 20. And if it's 2013, Benny is 8 years old. I'm so glad to hear Ryan is feeling really good about the support from the diabetes community. And I hope we see more of him racing. I really hope that's not just a one-time thing. Like he said, perhaps more to come. Okay, much more coming up next about what's going on over here. I gave you the headlines, including starting a new show and other things that are going on. I will give you the story right after this. One of the things we love the most about Dexcom G6 is that it helped Benny become more independent, but maybe not in the way you think. Remote monitoring, using the Dexcom share and follow functions, let us feel more confident, letting Benny do more away from home, sure, with friends or at camp. But just the design change of G6 meant Benny could use one hand to insert the sensor. He was 13 at the time, and he really didn't want our help anymore. It was perfect timing. Dexcom G7 is even more simple to use and gives effortless diabetes management that fits into your lifestyle without disruptions. Ease of use helps everybody, and I'm grateful that Dexcom product designers kept that in mind with G7. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. So before I let you go, a little bit more about those headlines I told you about at the top of the show. I'm sure I've talked enough about Mom's Night Out for you. If you are new around here, you can always learn more over diabetes-connections.com. Our next event, as I said, is in Providence, Rhode Island this weekend. If you're just hearing about it, I'm happy to squeeze you in. Just shoot me an email, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. We will be in Charlotte February 2nd and 3rd. And then more cities coming in 2024. There is a way at the link I just mentioned to sign up to learn more about our events. We have a whole interest list for people who just want to learn more about Mom's Night Out. All right, let me tell you a little bit more about the Type 2 show, about Diabetes Connections Type 2. If your first question is why, the answer is it's just time. I've been approached over the last 4 years, a couple of times now, to make a Type 2 diabetes show for somebody else. And there are a lot of factors that go into doing that. If you follow me on social media, you may also recall that in 2020, 2021, I was looking for a job. I thought I would go work for somebody else, whether in diabetes or podcasting or somewhere else. And long story short, it just didn't work out the way that I had thought it might. But it also didn't make sense for me to make this show for somebody else when I love doing Diabetes Connections and have done it successfully for all this time. So before I go any further, I am totally committed to original recipe Diabetes Connections. We are 600 episodes in. I don't know how many more we're going to do, but I'm not going to stop because I'm doing a type 2 show. I've actually hired my first help other than my editor, the fabulous John Buchanan, who has been with me. We were trying to figure it out the other day, either since episode 50 or episode 100. Before that, I had a college intern helping me. But John, you are priceless. Thank you for all that you do. But I've hired some help to do things for me that I'm just getting too busy to take care of, especially on the business end. There are going to be 2 separate podcast feeds. These are 2 separate shows, but there may be some crossover. And I plan to share at least the first 2 episodes here. And the In the News episodes are going to be on both feeds. Those episodes are all ready for people with all types of diabetes. And I do get great feedback that people with type 2 and gestational and LADA and type 1 and healthcare providers listen to In the News. So that won't change. I will post more in the Facebook group so I can get more of your feedback. But as always, just drop me a line if you want to let me know what you're thinking. And finally, in terms of this being episode 600, I went back and looked at some of my social media and email around launching the show in 2015. And I got to tell you, launching a show now is completely different because back in the day, there were very few places to share podcasts. When I launched in 2015, you didn't even have Spotify, Pandora, iHeart didn't have an app. I'm trying to think of the top ones where people listen. It was basically iTunes and then a couple of Google apps that probably don't even exist anymore. Getting ready to launch the Type 2 show has been wild because my hosting service said, do you want to share here? And it gave me a smorgasbord of places to share it. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's share it everywhere. And since then, we've seen, a lot of celebrity podcasts and everybody feeling like they have a podcast to, I think, a little bit more of the realization that it's not so easy and that perhaps everyone should not have a podcast. Although I still think if you want to go for it, you absolutely should. And drop me a line. I'll be happy to share what I think new podcasters should think about. At the end of the day, it really is all about community. Podcasting to me is all about serving you, serving my audience. It is a real and rare privilege to get to do something like this, which I love. Day in and day out, week in and week out for 600 episodes. And to get to share it with a whole new community is going to be an adventure that I'm really looking forward to. So, as always, thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon for episode 601. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
As you manage life with diabetes, Edgepark is here to support you on your health journey. Discover convenience and peace of mind with Edgepark, your trusted supplier in diabetes management supplies. Edgepark has a wide variety of pump and CGM solutions from top brands to fit your unique needs. Plus, Edgepark works with most insurance companies and handles the paperwork to navigate insurance complexities for you and make the ordering process as seamless as possible. You work hard to manage your diabetes? Let Edgepark take care of the rest. Visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the Edgepark logo to learn more.